Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Company culture can make or break an organization. It can contribute to the company's success or failure in many different ways, from the bottom line to a company's reputation among its employees, its customers, its vendors, and its competition. Company culture doesn't happen by chance, and it doesn't happen overnight. And while generally speaking, the development of a company's culture flows from the top down, in reality, every individual that is part of a company has the opportunity to contribute either to the culture as it is at the time or to changing of the culture, be it for the better or for worse. There are many variables that contribute to a toxic workplace culture. I will discuss a handful of them in this episode, and I will also give you some suggestions of how you can make a difference in your contribution, your daily contribution to the organization's culture. One of the biggest indicators of a potential toxic culture at the workplace is the lack or absence of core values. If a company does not have well-defined and well-understood core values, then they have no plan, no blueprint, no guideline for anyone within the company to conduct themselves and behave and conduct business on a daily basis. One of the best things that a company can do is create solid company values and then publish them so that everybody understands what those values are. The second component that is also related to company values pertains to whether or not management observes and follows those values. Even if a company has a list of well-defined and properly published values, core values, but nobody follows them, especially those in management and leadership roles, then there is really no reason and no incentive for the rest of the company's employees to follow those core values. And that altogether, when you look at it combined, contributes to a toxic company culture. In some ways, to some degree, the core values of a company can be seen as a code of ethics or code for proper behavior that would be associated with that company. Things that can contribute to the company's reputation, the company's success. You can see how having well-defined core values and then making sure that everybody is following these core values can be very important to how the company's culture is created, developed, and maintained. Another variable that is often associated with toxic culture at the workplace is a high turnover rate. There's a reason why people join a company and then quit soon after. There's clearly something going on. And in some instances, of course, this could have nothing to do with the company, but could be related to a personal situation for an individual who quits a job shortly after starting it. But when a high turnover rate is visible throughout the company over an extended period of time, that is a good indicator of toxic culture as one of the possible contributors to that. As member of a management team, as a company owner, your responsibility is to be aware of what your turnover rate is. A high turnover rate is relatively costly to the company. So as a member of a management team or owner of a company, it is in your best interest to know, even if it's for nothing other than your bottom line, if there's high turnover rate within your organization. But of course, the importance of that goes far beyond just your bottom line. It will be a big indicator that something is going on within the organization, potentially in terms of the culture. So as management, as a business owner, it is your responsibility to not only understand your turnover rate, but also to understand if your turnover rate is high, why that is, and then be proactive in taking corrective action to reduce high turnover rates. When companies don't promote from within, there's a bigger problem that needs to be examined. Sometimes this is related to a toxic culture. So this is something to be on the lookout for. If you are an employer or an employee and you see that individuals within the organizations are not being promoted, if new openings, new positions are being filled more with external candidates than from within the current workforce, then that's something to consider. Is it an issue of truly nobody within the organization is qualified for that position, or is it because the company tends to not promote from within? When a company does not promote from within, there are so many indicators related as to why that would be, but one of the most obvious ones is that the company is not investing in its current workforce and is not taking the time and making the effort of moving their employees upward and forward in their careers. So whenever a company is not promoting from within as a general rule, then that is worth examining as something that may be an indicator of toxic culture. This is something that can be addressed by both individuals and by management or the owner of a company. Something to be on the lookout for when we look for signs of toxic culture. High rates of absenteeism or tardiness can be an indicator of a greater problem. If individuals are absent or tardy on a frequent basis, then chances are there is a bigger problem that needs to be examined and addressed. When we see this kind of trend, these kind of behaviors on a larger scale across an organization, then we definitely need to examine what is happening to create such behavioral patterns. Toxic culture is often related and contributes to greater rates of tardiness and absenteeism. So as an employer, this is something that you have to examine. You have to understand what is happening and then correct whatever is causing these problems. And as an individual employee, you also have a responsibility to recognize if you are habitually tardy or if you are absent from work at a greater rate than would be considered normal. What is the reason for that? You clearly have a reason for that. If it's some life situation that is causing that, that's one thing. But if it's some disconnect between you and the company, your unhappiness within your job, your maybe feelings of resentment, or whatever the case may be, this is something that you have to examine to the point of understanding what is happening and then take corrective action. So whether the corrective action is simply changing your behavior, getting to work on time and not missing as much work, or perhaps making changes in your life so that you don't feel compelled to either miss work or be habitually tardy. So both the employer and the employee have responsibilities when it comes to any kind of evidence of greater rates of tardiness and absenteeism at the workplace. A toxic culture may often exhibit behaviors such as people working through lunch or working beyond their regular working hours, meaning working during evenings or during holidays or weekends, or sometimes even when someone is on vacation and they're still continuing to work. This is a serious indicator of something being wrong. A company that is interested in a healthy workforce should be cognizant of what kind of hours their employees are putting in. Is it a matter of too much work for an individual? Is it a matter of too much demand from the company to the individual in terms of being available on a virtually 24/7 basis? Obviously, there's an issue there. So if we have people working through lunch, working after hours, working on weekends and during holidays, this is a good indicator of some kind of problem, maybe multiple problems, one of which may be a toxic culture. This is something that needs to be addressed at the management level and at the ownership level, but also at the individual level. If you see this being part of your reality, you have the opportunity and the responsibility to address it. If you are working or you are available on a virtually 24/7 basis, then it's a problem of properly disconnecting from work. And you have to speak up. You have to say no. You have to say something. So both the employee and the employer, once again, have the responsibility of addressing this. And this can be, again, an indicator of toxic culture at the workplace. Sometimes toxic culture can be a breeding ground for unhealthy competition. There is much to be said for friendly competition at the workplace. Things that can serve as motivators, things that can bring teams together, that promote collaboration and cooperation in the long run can be very healthy for the workplace. But when competition turns into something that is unhealthy, toxic, and destructive in its nature, then that can be indicative of a toxic culture at the workplace and really needs to be examined and changed. It has to be stopped. It cannot be promoted as acceptable within the workplace. So that's something that, once again, both employer and employee should be cognizant of, be aware of, and then work to bring change about so that unhealthy competition is neither encouraged nor tolerated at the workplace. The last thing that I will discuss in terms of toxic culture in this particular episode is gossip and cliques. When you think of gossip and cliques, oftentimes you think of immature, childlike individuals. So maybe junior high school kids that are just mean to each other, forming cliques and gossiping. But unfortunately, this is a reality for many workplaces. And gossip and cliques are a classic symptom of toxic culture. So this is very important in terms of management being aware of this, as well as individual employees. And we're all responsible when it comes to either contributing to this kind of display, this kind of behavior, or refusing to participate and refusing to contribute to it. So as an individual employee, it is your responsibility to make the right choice. You either get involved and get engaged in the gossip and the cliques, or you focus on teamwork and doing your job. And as an employer, you have to be able to recognize these things as either being a problem and existing within your company and the culture or not, and then addressing them properly as needed. It is no secret that company culture is critical to everybody's well-being, from the organization as a whole down to each individual within the company. And while company culture can help to make or break the organization, and it tends to flow from the top, we all have the opportunity to contribute in our own way, either to forming and maintaining a healthy culture or to changing a culture that is unhealthy into something better. As today's episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Company culture can be critical when it comes to the organization's overall success. And toxic culture can be detrimental to not only the organization as a whole, but also to each individual within the company. Toxic company culture can be associated with a number of different variables. Some of those may include things such as an absence of company core values or the failure to follow those core values, high turnover rates or the failure to promote from within, high rates of tardiness or absenteeism among the workforce, working through lunch, after hours, during weekends or the holidays, unhealthy competition, gossip, and cliques. While culture and its development tends to flow from the top down, every individual has an opportunity to contribute on a daily basis to the company's culture. As the week unfolds, I invite you to review the ideas that were presented here today and consider how you can contribute to your company's culture, whether that means maintaining a healthy, beneficial culture or making a difference towards change, towards creating a healthier, less toxic company culture. And remember that whether you are a company owner, part of the management team, or an individual within the workforce, you have a daily opportunity to contribute to the improvement of the company's culture. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I hope that you will join me again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.